Hello friends, welcome to the Big Talk. I'm Trisha Brooke. This is a very special season of the Big Talk because I am talking with the most amazing guests from Podcast Row. Podcast Row's mission is to connect entrepreneurs with podcasters to help them share their story. In January, this exclusive event was held in New York City along with an incredible partnership with GLOW, the Global League of Women founded by Lisa Wang. GLOW is a new female-first community amplifying female voices that address critical issues, stories, and thoughts from business to politics and personal challenges. All of my guests this season have an incredible story, and you all know how important that is on the Big Talk. I am super excited to welcome our featured guest today, the incredible Danielle Stroble. Danielle, take a minute to fill us in on... Danielle, are you ready to drop in?
I really am. Thank you very much for having me.
Danielle Stroble makes a habit of keeping things interesting. Throughout her career, she's gravitated to projects large and small that have challenged her and taught her the ins and outs of non-traditional environments. After 20 years of following a path through business with expertise in financial accounting and business strategy, she began to consult others to craft their ideal business and lifestyle. Now she is at the helm of Keller Street Co-work, where she takes her project management and people skills to new heights. Most days, you can find Danielle engaging with each and every member, ensuring that everyone in the community has what they need to be at their most inspired and supported in their business endeavors. She wants to shape the lives of young women who will follow the path they want to, rather than the one they're supposed to. Danielle lives in Petaluma with her son and daughter. Danielle, take a minute to fill us in on anything I missed and talk a little about you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Trisha. I'm happy to be here. This has been an incredible experience, and as I've led up to this Podcast Row event, I've dug a little bit deeper into why I do the things that I do, and it all comes to connection. And I think as I look back to my experiences and my careers, and I say that in plural because I had a few, I realized that for so many years what I missed were connection and collaboration, and what I've realized now is it's important to be deliberate about the choices you make, the people you want to surround yourself, and the work you want to do. And for me, it's really comes down to just connecting people and seeing where that leads.
Share with our listeners why your story is unique.
Well, I would say I was a very young entrepreneur. Starting at the age of 10, I was doing the payroll for my parents' business, and they traveled the world. And so while they were gone, I had a younger brother that I was taking care of at a very young age, and I was taking care of the payroll. And so that kind of led to the mindset of just running business. And it was great.
Did you know at 10 that you had a mindset?
No, no, but looking back now, I see. But quite honestly, they weren't choices. So my career in business and empowering others to do business has been wonderful, but it wasn't a choice. It was kind of just following the next step. And it wasn't until, life kind of imploded for me in my 40s, and I made a decision to quit all of the work that I was doing, to leave a difficult marriage, to, basically go to the bottom and just figure out what was next. And I decided when I figured that out, I'm going to do it based on decisions and choices that I'm putting in front of me instead of just following the open doors. So not a lot of regret, but definitely grateful to be able to make my own choices.
Do you feel like having that entrepreneurial spirit gave you the courage to let go of everything and start over?
I think thinking back, probably it allowed me to get through it. I was desperate. There was a sense of desperation and survival. And I think the skills that I acquired through all of my business experience allowed me to start to rebuild one step at a time. But I was in survival mode at that point. It's allowed me to really do some great work now, though, because I bring entrepreneurs together, and they're collaborating and they're building businesses, and I'm helping along in that process.
You love the idea of community over competition.
For sure.
I am on board with this 100%. I always say, in my community, you might be on stage by yourself, but you're never alone.
That's great.
Talk to our listeners a little bit about your feelings about that.
Yes, it drives me. It's my breath. It really is. And I didn't know this until recently. But I think I think connection is what brings people to do better things, to amplify each other. And if I'm doing something great and you're telling your people about it and you're helping me along the way, then maybe there's something more great that I can do and somebody else can do the same thing. The feeling of isolation that comes with people who, especially people who work from home. I live in an area where by 2030, 50% of the working population will be independent workers. And they're working from home and they're lonely. And when you surround yourself with people who are doing great things or supporting each other to do great things, it doesn't matter if you're doing the same thing. There's an energy that follows with it. And just, we lift each other up for sure. 20 years I worked in car racing. That was competition. Nothing mattered other than winning. It wasn't really fun. It wasn't a lot of fun for me.
Let's go into the idea of community building a little bit more.
Sure.
I think that what you're saying is so valuable because I always say to my speakers, even if you are speaking about something that your neighbor is speaking about, because you have a unique point of view, it will be different. So the idea that we all have something important to contribute, and when we do it together, what happens?
Well, it grows exponentially for sure, and it, as you said, it evolves, right? So you kind of riff off each other, and you learn things that work for you and work for your community as well. And if everybody is making just that tiny little contribution every day, the ripple effect, I think, could be huge. And I mean, it sounds big and grandiose, but I can't imagine what like humanity would look like if everybody took the mindset of just building community and growing together.
I would love for us to take a moment to imagine what humanity would look like if we do that, because I think both the work we're doing is meant to raise up humanity and to create a better place in the world, and I think it's possible.
I do too. I really do too. Right now it feels very small to me because my community is like relatively small. But I know that I'm making an impact, and the people that I'm surrounding myself are also making an impact, and we're having fun along the way as well, which is important.
And you also came to New York City to find a growing community in Podcast Row, so welcome.
Thank you. I love New York. You guys are my people, I think.
We're cool people here in New York.
I agree.
It's
I agree.
true.
You have a bad rap, and I don't understand why.
We have a bad rap. What's that all about?
I don't know. Maybe it's just in California. People think that New Yorkers are super intense, but I've met some of the most amazing people in the city.
I think we are intense and amazing combo.
Yes. Right? Yeah, you can be both, right?
I'd love to talk a little bit about the IndyCar racing business and
Sure.
how intense that must have been, and if you were able to use that adrenaline and that fear and that competition in a positive way now in your business and as a speaker.
Yes. It was many years in an industry in which was very male dominated. At the time that I started in racing, I think I was one of less than a handful of women, and I worked in an unusual capacity in that most of the women were in public relations, but I worked as a manufacturer's representative. So I surrounded myself with men who were just trying really hard to beat each other. And it was the energy there. As you mentioned, adrenaline, that's what it was. Every day you operate on adrenaline. Also, you have to operate in a very aggressive manner, or I did at least. And I don't think that's my nature, however, I didn't know that. I look back now and I think adrenaline is probably what got me through it. And I think you exhaust yourself from it, or at least as a woman, I'm exhausted from the idea of having to compete 24/7 as opposed to enjoy the process. I travel the world with these people, and I still don't know how did we live in our little bubble? Like, we didn't experience anything, we just operated.
Talk more about what that means to only operate and not be experiencing what's happening, because I think there's a lot of speakers who take a stage who are just operating. They're not conscious of what's going on.
Yeah, it's a process for me. I many years in it, so you kind of get into that mode, but you just put one step in front of the other, and you're consistently in a space of left or right. Choose the left path or the left right, and do it quickly and do it, aggressively, and so you don't really think through it. And then to be able to take a step back, as I do now at the end of the day, and take a deep breath and consider the great people that I've met or the good work that we've done. It fills an entire side of my body that I just didn't really know existed. So I feel much more present. I just feel like I'm experiencing life a lot a lot more.
Has that made its way into your work as well?
100%. 100%. We're very intentional. A lot of the people who are members at Keller Street Co-work are creative. Not all of them, but we are very intentional about what we're trying to achieve. And so we're doing great things in business. They're building businesses. But at the same time, I have, for example, 30 different collaborations that are happening at any given moment within the space with people who didn't know each other before they walked on site. And they're building new projects, and they're also doing things fun. They're doing basketball together and creating friendships as well. But they feel fulfilled.
I create a safe space for my speakers, and that community is growing and growing. And I think you are also creating a safe space at Keller Work. Would you agree?
I would. I've been complimented that way quite often recently, and it's such a great compliment. I'm grateful to be able to do that.
Share more with our listeners what that means for you.
Well, I do love to connect, and I do it conversationally. I do it also in masterminds and that type of thing on the space. And I want people to feel like their ideas are important, and I also want them to feel open to receive better ideas or different ideas or just opportunities to be able to think outside of their normal track. This is what happens in co-working, for example. You can be very focused on your work and you have a particular train of thought, which is probably very valuable. When you're surrounded with other people, whether you're actively engaged in a conversation with them or not, you're creating there's another energy being created, and it's actually opening up another thought process within your work. And then you step back and you take the breath at the end of the day and you're like, wow, I did that.
I know how important mentoring young women is to you. How have you brought that into your co-working space? How have you brought it into your business? How do you nurture that in terms of a mentor, communicator, speaker, and why it's important?
It's very important for me I have a 13-year-old daughter, and we're in the thick of it right now because she's a teenager. And I think so many moments of the day, wow, if I knew some of the things that I know now as a 47-year-old woman when I was her age, or at least had the awareness that I was able to make choices that were great for me, how much more could I have done by now? So it's important for me to, as you mentioned, give a safe space for younger people, be able to change the language a little bit so that it's palatable for them, but let them understand that they are their own humans and they have so much to contribute, but they first have to figure out who they are, what's important to them, how do they want to feel, and make their choices as they grow older based on those. And maybe they'll be more intentional and aware that what they do is part of a bigger picture.
And have you been able to use your experience in a male-dominated field like car racing to inform what you're doing now as a communicator, as a mother, as a business owner?
For sure. We speak different languages. Ultimately, I speak a different language than what a male would potentially. Maybe we're saying the same thing and we're saying it equally as respectfully, but the way I would explain something to a woman and how to approach a project would be different than the way I would experience, the way I would explain it to a man. They speak differently, and their energy is different, and they process information differently. I'm fortunate to have this mastermind group in which I have men and women, and I witness every day the different language that they both speak. So it is beneficial for sure.
Would you say you're bilingual?
For sure. Thank you for that. Actually, my dream has been to be bilingual, literally, but I never really approached it from that direction. And you're right. Yes, I do think so. And I think that the experience working with men in racing and even before in construction with my parents' business allowed me to be able to do that.
Fantastic, fantastic. I would love for you to share with our listeners, Danielle, a little bit about why story is so important in order to connect on a deeper level.
Well, I think it's everything. I really do. I think I have, I can get into my head and say I have a million crazy stories. And sometimes I even think nobody's gone through the things that I've gone through. But the moment that I can verbalize them, the moment I can sit across from somebody and say, this happened to me, or I did this and I had this experience, they can look at me and say, wow, I had something similar. And then a dialogue starts, right? And you start, again, riffing off of each other. And it all comes down to story. We all have a story to tell, and it's an equally important story. But little bits of your story will remind me of why I am who I am, right? Because I'll find something that's very familiar.
What would you say to our listeners about the importance of sharing your story? Even if you're scared, even if you're afraid you're going to be judged, all of the things that come up when we are faced with sharing our story for the first time.
This is a great question, and this is something that I've been diving into deeply because I do have an element of a story that I feel is terribly important to tell, and I've been trying to figure out how to tell that in a way that's respectful for all the parties and still enabling people to get something out of it. I think telling your story is...
May I back up a little bit?
Yes, please.
Would you be willing to share some of that story here today?
Absolutely, absolutely. I was in a relationship, one of my marriages, and it was very toxic. It was very abusive, and it was very difficult. And I won't go into the complete detail, but the story, as I repeat it to others, it puts people off balance. It's a very hard story to hear. It's harder to hear than it is to tell, I think.
And that's because you've worked through it.
Yes, I have worked through it, but I had to do it publicly, and I did it through writing, and I saw the effect of the parties involved, and I had to make a choice, like me or them, and I chose me, and it was a very hard decision. But because of that, I think I'm able to connect even deeper to people, and I would love to have an opportunity to tell it on a bigger platform, because I think even if one person, it sounds cliche, but even if one person heard it and felt empowered to tell the same story, to heal, the magic that could come from that healing with that person is incredible.
I think that it's super important what you're saying, and there's nothing cliche about it. I truly believe that one big talk could potentially save someone's life. And that's why I put people onto the big stage and onto the big screen. Because when you do share that story, the one person that's meant to hear it will.
Yeah. I think you're right. I would encourage anybody to get the support they need to allow them to feel safe to tell their story, because everybody needs to hear it. Everybody. I think so.
I am so excited that you were here today with me. I would love... I want to thank you, Danielle, for being a featured guest today on The Big Talk. Where can our listeners get in touch with you?
I do have a website. It's daniellestroble.com, and it will link everybody to my podcast and to my co-working space, and I'll give everybody a little bit of a sneak peek as to who I am.
And we'll put all of that in the show notes.
Thank you.
Thanks again for listening. I hope you enjoyed this special season of The Big Talk with guests from Podcast Row and the Global League of Women. Check out the next episode, and remember, live your truth, be your authentic self, and drop in.